2, Web3.
Greetings, developers, metaverse architects, and hackathon participants. Welcome to another 1-2 Web3 hackathon workshop event that is happening not only here on YouTube, but also in GatherTown. Click the link below and join us there in the auditorium. We're going to be taking question and answer after the stream, both there and on YouTube. So it's going to be a grand event. Now, I'm Phil, head of events with Morales, and I'm here today with Peter, head of growth for XMTP. Now, if you don't know about XMTP, that's okay. It's a new, exciting, and emerging messaging protocol that uses Web3. We're going to learn about how to use it, how to integrate it with our dApps, and of course, more information on any prizes that they may be putting up for this hackathon. Peter, welcome to the stage.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really excited to be here.
All right, let's okay, and we can see your screen now, so the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just as Phil alluded to, this is the first time you're hearing about XMTP, I think that's great. Just to give you some background, we're building a Web3 native messaging protocol. So, our entire focus is working with developers to ensure that you can build, really truly native Web3 messaging applications, whether that's user-to-user chat or one-to-many messages. So there's just a myriad of things to go and build, and just really excited to be here with everyone today. I'm just going to go over kind of like big picture stuff. What is XMTP? Talk about core concepts of the protocol itself. Talk about the SDK that we have for developers to build applications, and then get into some examples and hackathon ideas and just point you to some resources. I'm hoping this can be fun and collaborative. So if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt or ask in the chat. And, just want to make this fun in general. So.
Oh, did we lose Peter a little bit? Maybe having some slight connection issues here.
I'm just really excited to be developing this protocol with everyone. So, I always like to start with, more of the big picture stuff. Like if you think about messaging, my background is largely building a lot of messaging applications and marketing communication protocols in Web 2. Messaging is really like a ubiquitous feature in our world, right? So if you think about, it's not just chat and messaging and through products like Messenger or things like that. It's also about just messaging the layers of an application, right? So there's a workflow that happens in an app. Typically, there's a message that goes out to it, informs users of what's happening. So, I always like to remind people that, messaging is just really like a ubiquitous part of the stack, right? So our goal is just really to make it easy for developers to add messaging to any Web3 project in minutes. So like I mentioned, it could be two users chatting through an NFT marketplace, so people talking, buyer and seller. One-to-many notifications. So we work with a lot of dApps and DAOs who are wanting to tell people, hey, there's a vote coming up, or there's an event that just happened in the DApp that's meaningful to you. Or many to many, group chat, right? So if you think about like Twitch or different type of streaming, that there'd be a group chat going on. And then down the road, like machine to machine, right? So like the ability for a machine to, from a smart contract, send a notification to another, application and have it execute something meaningful. So, the reason I bring this up is because the opportunity to contribute value to this ecosystem is so broad, right? And that's really our core mission. Our core mission isn't to go out and build a big business around a messaging protocol. Our mission is to unlock a messaging protocol for the Web3 world so that everybody can come in and build applications that create value. So I think it's not just about, again, like hackathon ideas, is there's an opportunity to really come in and build companies around these things because the needs are so vast for Web3 and messaging that I think there's just a place for everyone to play. So we always like to say, like, literally every team can add, XMTP messaging to their submission and be eligible for a prize, because I think there's so many opportunities to create, meaningful projects. And this is always fun. So like after this, if you want to just try it out, we have like a fully functional example chat app that's hosted. So if you go to xmtp.chat, just sign with your wallet, you can just send me a message at peterm.eth. So I think you'll get the idea of one, how fast it is to, start doing this. And then you can see like it's completely native Web3 chat. It's end-to-end secure, and it's, we're decentralizing this. And this chat application is also, fully available on our GitHub repo, open source. So a lot of developers just go there and fork that and start building applications. And I think we've done a good job at, from the code perspective and the extrapolation of the methods, that it's easy. You can get this stuff up and running in literally minutes. So what is XMTP, right? Like technically, so we're really building this open, composable, and decentralized communication network for blockchain wallets, right? And this is really important to us. So one, the nodes itself will be fully open sourced. We're designing in a way that protocols are completely composable with each other, right? So we're doing it so that there's no walled garden of communication, but rather that, XMTP works with protocols like Lit, or we're talking to people like Lens. And so, we're designing in a way that everything is more Lego blocks that you can build together and make it really easy for developers. The second thing, and then I'll say, is like decentralization is really core to us, right? Because what we don't want to build is what we think of as like a messaging monopoly, right? We don't want, Web3 developers to say, hey, when I make a choice about who is my messaging backbone, that I have to make in consideration about, am I going to be beholden to a single entity in the future? So decentralization solves that, right? So there's no single entity governing the network, and that everybody shares in that ownership. So it increases the health and prosperity of the network. So those are, really the core principles. As a protocol itself, we're built on top of Waku and libp2p. So we're, making use of things that were, many years in the making, and then providing a wrapper to make it work in Web3. The other thing is, we're not on-chain messaging. We have our own network. So more like a Filecoin, where you sign and you establish an identity, but it's, the messages themselves are persisted in the node. So the XMTP network, whether that's, storage while it's waiting for the recipient to come online to get the message, or it's being relayed. So we have our own XMTP network that users, that messages run through. The other thing that's really interesting about this that I think is new and unique is what we think about as interoperability from the inbox. So, as people build inboxes into, many different apps and applications and wallets, messages are available, anywhere across the network. So this is kind of cool, where, somebody may literally send a message from, a marketplace. They say they're on like OpenSea, and then somebody could be on a DApp and see those messages there. So we're really creating this, interoperable backbone network that messages can reach any user across across Web3 at any time. And that's really important, right? So as Web3 continues to grow, this gives an opportunity for people to create re-engagement, so they can reach users when they aren't available. And the other thing is it allows a user to truly own their messages. So if they decide to stop using a DApp, there's no walled garden where they lose their social graph and their messages. these messages are always portable. The last thing is, I'll just say what we're really focused on, and I kind of alluded to this before, is we're focused on enabling like a diverse set of use cases across messaging. So again, I think this is really important and should unlock creativity where you think about, hey, there's so many different use cases in messaging. There's probably a way to use XMTP. And we want to really help, contribute to that and make it easy for people not only to build projects, but also to get funding and to grow their projects. So even after this hackathon, we're helping people raise money. We're getting them grants. We're doing everything we can to keep increasing the value of the ecosystem. So let's look at the core concepts. At the core, there is a messaging protocol. Users can send and receive encrypted messages through clients, authenticating by a way of a wallet signature. So messages are persisted in nodes of the XMTP network, enabling portability for anyone's communications, right? So at the core underneath that is a protocol. And then both clients and nodes are implemented as WAKU2 peers, but with more specialized functions and capabilities, meaning, each node on the network is a peer that when a message is sent, it then gets gossiped out across the network. And then what we've done is we've gone in, we've added a bunch of specialization on top of WAKU to make it work better for developers in Web3. So outside of the protocol, then there's clients, right? So clients are really the end destination for the protocol, where once a message is received, it's really a client, and the client is like an application, right? So encoding and decoding message formats are used as a standard interface, right? So we have a standard payload that gets sent across as part of a message. And then the clients use the SDK to encode and decode. So when a message is sent, it gets encoded. And when it gets received, it gets decoded. And the other thing that I'll call out here is, it's encrypted, right? So when you sign with the XMTP network, we create a key pair relationship, and then we encrypt the messages. And then when the recipient comes onto the network and then signs, we use that key pair to obviously decrypt message content. So everything's end-to-end encrypted. And so when clients basically are responsible for submitting and retrieving encrypted messages to and from the network. And the other thing is they're responsible for generating these secure wallet-based identities that are capable of encrypting and decrypting messages. So go ahead.
Well, I did have a question there.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of us are cipher nerds or encryption nerds in cryptocurrency. And anytime we hear an encryption, maybe we want to know a little bit more. The key, the private key, public key pair that is used in encrypting and decrypting, is that the same pair that we're using for our wallet? Or can you tell us a little bit more about that? Is that a separate pair that's generated on the XMTP network?
Yeah, great question. So it's a separate key pair, right? So when you sign with XMTP, we're then using that to generate our own key pair that then the user has unique to the XMTP network. And I'll also say, I'm not an engineer, so I can't go incredibly deep, but it's not the same thing as your wallet. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. And so, that's really important because then, one, obviously encryption, it's important that, we're not reading any messages and no applications are, but also that user then can go to any place on the XMTP network, sign with that key pair, and then pull down their messages from wherever. So what we really like about that is in the end, users' messages are secure, and then they really, own those messages where they're the ones who can control from wherever they want to see messages being sent and received.
Excellent.
And then the last thing are nodes. So, nodes are going to be responsible, well, they are responsible for relaying encrypted messages into replicated storage. As of right now, XMTP is hosting our own nodes. And the reason that we're doing that is just primarily around understanding more as we roll out the network. So are there attack vectors? Are there things that we sort of want to, quote unquote, centralized, centrally operate for the time being while we learn more? But over time, the entire focus is going to be on decentralization, open sourcing the nodes, and then letting any person on Web3 come along and host a node. And that's just going to be about one, no single entity governing, but more increasing the health of the network. So they're responsible for obviously relaying the encrypted messages, creating more storage across the network, and then persisting and advertising wallet-based identities, those wallet-based identities being that key pair relationship from XMTP. So for now, we're hosting our own nodes, but in the near future, it's sort of like friends and family who are building applications close to us are going to start hosting their own nodes. And then, probably next year we'd have, full decentralization where anyone can come along and start hosting a node, which is, really exciting milestone for us in really committing to decentralization for messaging. So just to give you an idea of, how this typically plays out in the architecture, right? So this is, really kind of the current state of XMTP. So you have, wallet or a dApp, or marketplaces, several different types of apps. And typically they'd have like, the SDK in the application, right? So the SDK is more facilitating these communications between the network and the client. And then they use that SDK to build things like, an inbox and a composer. So how it really looks in the wild is, dApp will have an inbox where a user can then sign and see all their messages. And they can then use that SDK to also do like notification badges. So when a new message comes in, they can alert a user. And then that user can use it to communicate, obviously with anybody on the network, or, and dApps use it to communicate with their users, right? So a lot of dApps will then broadcast to users about, different types of events relative to the app. And then users use it to broadcast back and forth. So pretty simple. I think if you think about like a Web 2, it'd be more like a Sendbird, except here it's, fully Web 3 and end-to-end encrypted. And then that SDK is then used across the entirety of, the different spectrum of applications, right? Right now, I'd say that the SDK, call it, it's in React.js. What we're working on right now is React Native. So that should be done, very shortly, and then move on to things like Swift and Kotlin. But pretty simple in its current state in architecture. The thing that I get really excited about in thinking about messaging long-term is there's so much value to then go and create. So where we have today, sort of these, basic examples of an inbox living within an application, and those inboxes, can communicate with each other. Over time, what we're really seeing is, people asking about, well, who is building then like another protocol around, spam and safety? So for example, some previous hackathon winners have built like, XMTP plus lit, like building token gated chat where users could define the rules of which they're allowing messages to reach their inbox, right? Which is super cool. It's actually better, than any form of communication we have today, where users can literally say, hey, somebody hasn't transacted at least once before on Ethereum, or they don't have these series of tokens, or they don't have, different set of rules that they can create, that I don't want to see their messages. Now, it doesn't mean that they couldn't have another inbox where they can see every message that has ever been sent to them, but they can actually curate, they can curate, end users or even application developers can curate on behalf of their users to set up rules to really keep users safe from spam. So it's incredibly powerful to see in the wild. The same thing is true with like the graph. So like we're working with, Lens and CyberConnect, where developers could plug into a social graph and then use that graph to basically establish the rules around messaging. So they could say, anybody who I'm connected with on Lens, let messages flow through. And the same thing is true for identity. So again, I think if you think about, and the slide should say, kind of nearish today's state, really, as we see these applications start to come to life. The point being that, we're really creating XMTP to be interoperable with all the other protocols so that application developers have complete control over, the application experience they build and the rules that they establish for safety for users. And I think what's really cool is, again, apps can define those rules, and they can even start to push those rules down to users so that users can really, and over the next couple of years, become more comfortable with this, and then we can see, far more advanced solutions around, spoofing and phishing and fraud that are like rampant now in email and causing, tons of problems in this industry around Discord, fraud and spoofing, Twitter, where application developers can now control that and actually start to keep users safe. And then, the last thing I'll call out on the slide is on the network, of course, like, soon it'll be third-party nodes that will be communicating with the XMTP SDK to, incentivize the health of the network and grow that out. As of today, XMT messages are off-chain and, interoperable across blockchains whose wallets are supported, primarily like EVM chains right now. So our primary focus is on Ethereum at this point. We'll go to Solana next. But we like to say, like, if it signs, it sends. So it's interoperable across EVM chains, including testnets. So as you can see, as you start to begin your application, like, you can go right into testnets and it'll just work. So it's cool. So I wanted to get into the SDK just to give a light overview of what we built for application developers. In a nutshell, the SDK is really focused on wallet-based authentication, right? So then, obviously, then the wallet connection management. So managing the connection between the application and XMTP. The SDK manages the key pair generation, key storage, and key signing. So I think as you get into the SDK, it's very easy to just stand this stuff up where the authentication flow, the signing flow is just relatively out of the box. This then gets into like relationship initiation, conversation initiation. So the SDK can then, like, if you want to message another user, it helps you manage like establishing that relationship and then establishing that conversation. So both in the raw SDK itself, as well as the example chat app in React, you'll see that, it's basically out of the box. And I think this is really important. Like, I really, we have a great engineering team. We put just a ton of effort into making this stuff incredibly easy to just get up and running so that you can focus on, how you want to create value on top of XMTP. And of course, then everything that has to do with messaging, right? So sending messages, retrieving the history of all the messages, streaming messages. So the SDK, the protocol actually streams out messages. And then, things like content validation and format validation. So, the protocol itself has, a payload on top of it that helps with applications understand how to display certain messages. So something that I'll talk about in a little bit is like content types. Content types are basically extensible payloads on top of the protocol, which application developers can define, unique in messages experience. I think it'd be, most similar to like MIME in SMTP, right? So you have like images and media coming across. In XMTP, we have those same principles, but we call those, content types. So an example is like replies or images or reactions. But now developers are extending those to be unique to Web3. So for example, say a button content type that could replace links so that people aren't getting spoofed through malicious, hard to understand long URLs. But there's an actual payload, which could be, a button content type. Another thing that we're working on with IPFS is like an attachment content type. So you can attach a file and it goes into IPFS. And then there's a payload that's standardized. So that's, really cool because then other applications can understand that payload and then render that attachment through a standard. So I think this is again, just something I'd highlight. Like, it's just a really fun time, I think, to be collaborating with something like XMTP, because you can not only come in and, quickly stand up messaging and start to create value, but you can also contribute to really meaningful ways to the protocol itself around, things like content types, which I think allow for a lot of creativity and ultimately building things that are, distinctly Web3 and better than, existing communication messaging platforms in Web2. So that's the SDK. I think it's intentionally simple. And then, as I alluded to, supported wallets. Connected wallet must be present in order to initialize the client. So the SDK does depend on a wallet, and we do not include like a wallet abstraction. So it's like to build these applications, you would already need some way of obtaining like a wallet connection. And then, for now, identities, need to be generated from an Ethereum wallet's public address and private key. So that's sort of the foundations of which we build the key pair relationship.
Peter, do you offer any additional support for developers who are building their own wallet and want to integrate XMTP into their wallet? We may see this a little bit as in a recent stream, we talked about game development, and we talked about the advantages of controlling the wallet yourself, but then kind of just giving access to the users. And in that model, we'd need to actually build in XMTP functionality, I assume.
Yeah, so it's a couple of things that we're working on right now. I would say that, yes, we're very closely working on some things that help address that. I think it'd be like great follow-up for this. And then something that we're sort of actively talking about in our Discord channel with engineers. So definitely something we're planning for. And probably over the next couple more months, have something like much more deeply integrated specifically for a wallet.
Gotcha. But so it sounds like for the scope of this hackathon, any participant that's including XMTP will want to pick one of the supported wallet solutions as a starting point and yes, integrate using that wallet.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Great question. Thank you. So, I already touched on this. I think this is like the real fun part as we've started to see developers build out different content types to handle, essentially like functionality within messages. So if you think about a world in which, we continue to evolve these standards around these content types, it's just allowing us to build, from scratch, essentially, the functionality or media coverage or types of interactions that we want present in chat. So this is something that as you're inspired to think about, well, what could messaging really be in Web3? These content types allow for that. And I think it's just a really fun way. It's something I wanted to call out to collaborate with us. And essentially how it works is, people typically have gone and developed their own payload. So in your application on top of XMTP, you can really like extend any type of payload you want. And we have like graceful degradation, right? So applications are going to know, hey, there's a fallback state. If I don't understand, the SDK knows, right? If I don't understand like the payload of this, I can always fall back to just the text. But typically developers have then gone and built their own payloads and then sort of surface it to us and we share it with the community. And, we typically do sort of like roundtable discussions about the standard. And then, a lot of this stuff ends up becoming standards. So I think, any and all creativity is warranted and a fun way to collaborate. And then, it's something that can become a standard. And then, all the other applications will typically adopt this. And then what they do is their applications then understand how to render it. So it started to move really quickly. And just something to keep in mind is a way that you can really contribute to this community and help, extend the standard. So security, I won't like go too deep in this. We've tried to enable, the SDK to establish these secure, unfalsifiable relationships between identities. So it's just really core to us, right? I think there's a lot of work that we will continue to do. We've tried to design the security algorithms to be extensible and abstractable, knowing that, we need to get better. But, the core problem that we're trying to solve is just that the sender and receiver are who they say they are, and there's no way to falsify that relationship. And, this is, I think, another key thing is like, I just mentioned this, but the ability to replace these algorithms and expand on a set of supported algorithms in a backwards compatible manner is just something that we put a ton of thought into. Knowing that in the future, we try to a little bit future-proof this, knowing that algorithms will get better and that the security will continue to evolve. But I would say that, from a high level, like a company, we just think that security is really, really important. And, I know people, sometimes question, hey, is end-to-end security encryption, necessary in messaging? We think it is, right? Because we think that, users have a right to privacy, and if you look at things like email, the ability to read messages comes at a cost of your privacy, and really, creates these business models in which, privacy basically gets repackaged and sold in the form of advertising, right? So we're really trying to let developers control these experiences while keeping their users safe and building on new paradigms that make messaging actually better for users, right? And if you think about, the advancement of phishing and spoofing, how sophisticated it's getting, we look at security as just a really cornerstone of the value that we're creating, so that developers really don't have to think about that and own that, but that we can put, a large engineering team against that to help keep users safe. So hackathon ideas, right? So for us, it's just about, being a building block in the composable web is where we really want to reward people. And we don't like to be overly prescriptive. I think if you look at, some of the things that we put out, we have a ton of ideas that people can go and build. But, again, messaging can go into any application, whether it's an intercom widget for support, or quickly letting users chat with each other, or putting an inbox in an application so that, dApps can reach users. There's been hackathons where, 50 or 60% of projects have submitted using XMTP, which is really exciting because we just think that messaging can go into any application. What we're really looking for is just people to be creative in how they think about different use cases, how messaging impacts that, right? So, in gaming, chat is very core to the gaming experience. And, there's ways that gamers could exchange digital assets through XMTP chat in the game experience, right? So there's really cool ways that you could think about, gaming unique to Web3. I think with any existing Web2 application, rethinking those workflows, the way that messaging, if you look at the world of Twilio, they're powering thousands of use cases across Web2 to let messages flow. So any way that people can then see messaging working in Web2, repurposing that for Web3, even if it's just like, a developer tool, right? Just so developers can quickly add like a notification layer or rules around notifications. There's just so much opportunity to be creative and to create value. So, and the same thing goes with like, the DAO and governance tracks, right? Like DAOs need a way to really reach users, to inform them of like, hey, votes are coming up, or here's something meaningful that you should be aware of. So we look at this as, messaging is core to all of this. And in a way that, we're trying to help developers build applications. And I think what the prize is, it's just about helping the world to continue to see, how needed messaging is specifically to Web3. And our belief is, again, once, we can sort of iron out all of the requirements around messaging with developers, it then unlocks, if you think about the entire Web2 space of all these SaaS apps, they're entirely dependent on messaging. So we like to think about it as when we unlock with developers messaging, it allows for so many more applications to come in and grow the space. So we're really just trying to make this a collaborative effort to make it so that messaging in its current form that's totally ubiquitous to the world now also works in Web3 without a lot of friction, so that everybody can come in and adopt the principles that we all know and believe to be better. So the other thing I'll say is, we're just highly collaborative. If you want to jump on a call with me, if you want to like send emails, join our Discord, and I'll post at the end. But we just really, developers are the most core to our day over day, and we just really love engaging on this stuff and collaborating. It's most meaningful to inform us of what we should build in the protocol and SDK, and then just meeting new teams and helping those teams become successful in building out products. So on the resources side, as I mentioned, github.com/XMTP. This is where you'll find the JS SDK, soon to be React Native SDK. We have this fully functional React app, chat app. So I think if you pull it down, you can just see all of the components there that teams have literally stood this stuff up in less than 30 minutes. And then we have a pretty comprehensive quick start just to help people get off the ground. Then of course docs.xmtp.org. We continue to build out the docs section. There's just a bunch of handy resources there. And then lastly, discord.gg/xmtp. Again, our entire engineering team is in there. Our product managers are in there. I'm in there. Developer relations people. So as you continue to think about projects, and even if you just want to brainstorm, we always welcome people to come in and engage. So then the last thing I'll kind of touch on is the roadmap. So right now, as I mentioned, like we're really focused on this progressive decentralization in a way that we think that it's really critical that Web3 have a decentralized messaging protocol that everybody can plug into and use and not be beholden to a single entity 2 years from now. So right now, we're operating our own nodes and adding, like I said, like temporary security layers, just things that we can do to make sure that everybody's safe. But in the future, we're replacing all these controls with a series of features that will help manage spam, reduce surface area for malicious attacks, ensure network reliability. So I say that for two reasons. One, I think it's important for everybody to know, like, in say a year's time, they can come on and host nodes. And I think that as we think about an incentives layer, it would probably be like rewarding node operators. So I think there's a fun, avenue for people to pursue there. The second thing I think is like really important here is, again, I think about like being a developer and creating value on the nodes themselves. There's just such an opportunity to think about problems like spam and malicious attacks and like increasing network reliability. So again, I like to just call these things out because I just think there's so many ways to collaborate, not only at the SDK building out applications level, but ultimately when we decentralize at the network level, and creating a lot more value for the entire Web3 ecosystem. And then in the platform support, what's really next is React Native. Then we'll get into Swift and Kotlin. We've been seeing a ton of developers asking for the ability to build, rich mobile applications. And then lastly, we'll start to get in more into server side, as I mentioned, like more of the servers being able to execute notifications, even machine to machine. So I'll stop there. Hopefully this wasn't too boring, but I hope it's inspiring people to think like, hey, there's a lot that we can go and build with messaging and in any hackathon project. And very genuine. We've been incredibly successful helping teams get grants, even raise seed rounds and VC funding. So as you think about, hey, there's an idea that I have here that I think is fun for the hackathon to submit, but grow beyond it. Help us, introduce yourselves and get to know our team and let us know how we can be helpful. So just really excited to be part of this hackathon. Think this is an awesome opportunity to engage and really excited to see what people build with XMTP.
Amazing. Thank you, Peter. That's perfect. I already have a couple ideas myself, just listening to you here. One of those I wanted to ask you is, and this may be something that the SDK is capable of, maybe not. If not, maybe it's an idea for future development, but is it possible to code a message that indicates who it's from, but is readable by anyone? So that you could prove who the sender was, but that it would be a public message.
Yeah. It is possible. So it isn't something that like natively the SDK does. We have a team who we work closely with called Relay, and they basically their group chat solution makes use of this. this would be a great thing to follow up with if people are interested in that. I can send the resources of how they've done it. Again, they're relay.cc, and they have examples on GitHub of how to do this, but definitely possible.
Do you have time to join us in GatherTown after the stream here today?
Yeah.
Perfect. And we can share some of the links there for anybody who's interested.
That'd be great.
The only other idea that I was thinking of I wanted to share with you was it seems like XMTP could add a layer of immersion to anybody who's working on a game experience.
Yeah.
Because how cool would it be if you're interacting with an NPC and they say something like, I'll message you tomorrow at 10 a.m. And then you get a message through, your XMTP enabled wallet that's from that character, inviting you to do something in game. And these are just ideas off the top of my head. I'm sure you guys who are watching are thinking of even better ones, but this is, where we're going with this. How far can you take messaging? And of course, even a step further would be, are you sending a command to a smart contract or to a program that you wrote through the protocol? Because that's, of course, possible too, as we learn.
Totally. No, it's so exciting. Like, I think what's really fun is we're starting to see a lot of interest from gaming companies. And it's those new and unique ways to add value, right? Like, it's not just, hey, we all know that messaging is so important in games, so slap it into Web3, but it's how can we use Web3 to make messaging even more immersive? So I think that's so exciting for you to call that out. And I think it's a real opportunity.
Absolutely. Now, we do have one question here in the chat. I'm going to throw it up on the screen. I'll be honest. I'm not sure what you mean here. Did you mean ENS? What's a EPNS?
Oh, EPNS. So EPNS is Ethereum Push Notification Service.
Okay.
It's it's great protocol, great team, similar to XMTP. I don't know. I think I can't see the screen. Let me.
Oh, yeah. Their exact question is, how would you differentiate XMTP and EPNS? Could a hackathon submission integrate both?
Yeah, people have done it, right? People have used both EPNS and XMTP. In fact, in GatherTown, I'll post an example of somebody built what's called OTC swap, where people could message with NFT holders across any marketplace using Seaport, EPNS, and XMTP. I think where we're different is EPNS, you get notification broadcast to the app. So you need to download the EPNS app and then get set up so that you're receiving notifications. We're just taking the approach that dApps just build, inboxes. So with XMTP, you can just build it right into the application itself and basically reach users anywhere they are. And so people will have, like wallets will have push notifications. dApps will have just inboxes. People are building Chrome extensions to basically push notifications into the browser. So I think where EPNS is different, their destination and people installing the app and their incentives model. And ours is just more about straight up, being a messaging layer and having those messages live anywhere. But tons of projects have used both of us. I think there's great use cases for both and totally welcome.
All right. Did we have any other questions before we take an intermission here? Just checking out the chat. All right. Anybody who maybe does have a question or just wants to chat a bit with myself or Peter, join us in GatherTown. Link is below in the description. And we're going to take about 15 minutes here, and then we'll see you there.